Welcome back to my channel. I'm Traben, and in today's video, we're going to be doing a review for Rhythm of War. I'm doing a dedicated Rhythm of War review for a couple of different reasons. Normally, I would fold this into my Epic Series Summer series, but one, it's no longer summer, so that title is just not working anymore. Two, it's kind of pivoted from being Epic Series Summer to basically just being Sanderson's Cosmere. And three, I have a lot to say about this title specifically, more so than I did Oathbringer, despite them getting a similar rating. When we're talking about a 1,200 page, almost 500,000 word book, I'm not going to be able to touch on every single thing that happens here. I'm just going to hit on, I think, the key ideas that really stood out to me, what makes this book great in my opinion, what are some really good things about it, and then what are some things that are still kind of dragging down this series for me, and why it ultimately lands where it does as an overall read. I'm going to start with the positives, and I think the best thing about Rhythm of War is that we do see a turning point in a number of characters' stories. One of my complaints with Oathbringer was how the entire book felt so down, how it was a series of failures on the part of our protagonists, and how that works only in the larger scale of the overall story. We're going to take a little bit of a detour and talk about the challenges of writing a book series and why middle books tend to fare more poorly in my estimation than do the initial book or the conclusion. Imagine most people who will click and watch this far into a review for an absolutely massive book like Rhythm of War will be familiar with your basic plot diagram. You have your exposition, the beginning of a narrative where you establish your characters and setting. You have your rising action where all the complications occur. You have your climax, which is the last bit of conflict in your book, and then you have your falling action, and finally your denouement or your resolution where everything is wrapped up and the story concludes. The biggest issue I find with middle books in series is they have to both do this on their own. The story has to be a complete narrative with its own rising action, climax, falling action, etc., but also has to serve as a certain point for the larger narrative that you're telling as well. And I think part of my frustration reading Oathbringer is it really was a lot of the conflict, the rising action of the grander arc that is the first 5 books of the Stormlight Archives series. So while it serves a very clear purpose and a very important purpose for the overall story of the entire series, I feel as a standalone book, it is less than satisfying because so much of the book is just seeing the characters struggle against these odds that they can't yet surpass because we're not far enough into the larger arc, the larger series narrative to where they've gotten to the point where they are fighting back and becoming more adept at handling the situation that they find themselves in. The climax of Oathbringer serves as one of our characters' turning points for getting to the part where we are now moving against the powers that be on Roshar and building up to our final climax. And I feel like in Rhythm of War, we get 2 other characters reaching their turning point, and I'm hoping to see that continued into book 5, that we no longer have these cyclical narratives with a few of our characters. In particular, I'm thinking about Kaladin and Shallan. Kaladin with his continuous roller coaster from the depths of despair to the heights of elation that he continues to do throughout the series. He ebbs and flows, waxes and wanes, if you will, throughout the entirety of the series. And in book 4, I think we finally got to a very explosive, very exciting turning point for him when he speaks the fourth oath for the Windrunners and is now seeming to accept something that he refused to do in book 3. And in so doing is hopefully going to finally move past this as a character. And I do feel like it is both realistic and important that Kaladin went through the struggles that he did for the previous 3 books, but I also feel like given the amount of time we're dedicating to this character, it did feel like a lot, and particularly when we're having more losses than successes, as we did in book 3, it can feel like a slog and can feel very depressing. Shallan's the other character that I feel is going to move past the conflict that's been motivating her character primarily since book 2, I would say. I don't know if it's a multiple personality disorder, but it certainly is presented as something akin to that, where she's got these different personas that all vie for control of her body. She got to the point in book 3 where she is now like utilizing them and they're in harmony, but in book 4 we finally start an actual healing process in much the same way that Kaladin does. And I liked the parallelism there in these characters finally beginning to heal, and I do think that started with Dalinar at the end of book 3. The parallel structure of these characters' narratives I think is very important and presented in a very effective way. I really enjoyed the stuff with Shallan and her struggling with these different personalities, her fear of revealing her past and her past trauma to others, and whether or not they were going to accept her was very moving to me and spoke to me in a way that Kaladin's story did not. But I do feel like even with her story, there came a point where it was like, just tell someone. Everyone around you is so supportive and so trusting and so loving to you, and she is so in her head about how if she just reveals this one truth about herself, then everything is going to fall apart and her entire life is going to be miserable. And it seems like that even for me, who was really enjoying this storyline, that began to drag a bit in book 4. Another thing I really enjoyed about Rhythm of War is basically everything that happens in the cognitive realm. The trial that Adolin finds himself in, the revelations about what happened to the Deadeyes was very emotionally impacting to me in that trial scene, where Maya finally speaks out and says something about what has happened in the past and how they can't have her trauma. Also really enjoyed the revelations we got about Shallan's past and her relationship with her Spren. The lore building here on the Spren side and seeing the cognitive realm again, getting a better sense of how that works was all very engaging and definitely had my attention. Of course, the climax of the book was incredibly exciting. There is this concept of a Sanderlanche. So this is the idea that Brandon Sanderson books tend to build up to a climax where in the last 100, 200 pages, you have all these epic, exciting fights and big scenes and truly amazing moments. And this one did not disappoint. It does the slow build up over literally hundreds and hundreds of pages. Does that make it worth the end where basically all the exciting stuff happens? Here I felt like the beginning of the book was working really well for me because we were jumping back and forth between characters, and it was nice to have the stories broken up that way and kind of move everybody forward at a good pace. And then we got to, I think, part 3, and I did not care for part 3 at all. The beginning did really well. Maybe first 200 pages where we were bouncing around between the different characters was breezy and easy to read, and then of course the end was very exciting, and we had all the crazy stuff, all the fallout from the things that were happening in the book occurring there. Great stuff. We'll get into the negatives, and we'll start with, I think it's part 3, which is the bit where Urithiru is under siege, and we have Kaladin and all the Windrunners losing their power. We have Navani being more or less made a captive to kind of aid the Fused in learning more about the way that the light and the tones of Roshar work. I think this was the clearest point so far in the series where it's very evident that no one is telling Brandon Sanderson to like scale back at all or to like tone it down. I really did not need pages and pages and pages of the intricate workings of the Fabrials and this glove that they make, and how it uses a pulley system of weights in order to transfer the energy to the glove, and all the switches it has and exactly how it works. And it was just like, it was too much. I'm like, I'm not building this, I don't need a schematic for how to make this glove. And that was the point where really I was like, I just can't with this. So I was listening to the audiobook, and I was tuning out quite a bit of the inner workings of this system, because they just needed to explain it once. They just need to explain that it uses a pulley system and that transfers the energy, and now you can activate the glove and you can point it in a direction and you move that direction based on a speed that you want to go. Okay. It didn't need to be, I didn't need to have the prototype step and then a character explaining it to someone else, and then that same character experimenting with it and talking about all the buttons and switches it has. It did not need to have that much detail. Again, I'm not building this. So that really dragged that down. And that, along with the fact that we're in a siege situation where everyone's depowered and we only have a handful of characters that can even do anything, it added this tedium to a part of the book that already felt hindered. The characters already felt hindered. The story already felt slowed down. I didn't need it to be slowed down even more with all this technical jargon about the way the glove works. That was a miss for me, that entire section. Like I said, the stuff in Shadesmar, the stuff with Adolin, the trial, I actually found that much more engaging than this story in the Tower. And then there are just my general gripes of how I don't feel like this series needs to be as long as it is. This was almost 500,000 words. It goes on for so long, and when I look back on it after I finish one of these books, I feel like not a lot happens. The story moves very slow, and the next one's, I think, going to be even slower. It's only going to take place over the course of 10 days, but it took this entire book for the terms of an agreement that was made, or a challenge that was issued at the end of book 3, to even be started. So I think I mentioned this when I finished book 3, that I had read the description of book 5, and I was like, this sounds like taking off of exactly where we left off. All these like macro level issues with the way the war effort is going, and like, where do we need to station our men, and what could this character be plotting, what is their true intention, that has lost its suspense because I already have the sense that Taravangian is one of these characters like Light from Death Note, where they are presented as this incredible intelligent person, but the reason why they're incredibly intelligent is because they basically have not plot armor, but it seems like they already know, he can already see into the future essentially, and knows how all these little details are going to play out to get him exactly what he wants. And so even as there were moments that I feel like were meant to make you sympathetic toward him, or think that maybe he didn't have a plan all along, or that he was going to end up being a good person, at no point did I buy it. At no point did I believe that the main characters had gotten one over on him, or were able to figure out the brilliant machinations that he had put into place, because he's just way too smart for them. And that's tedious. That lacks any kind of suspense when you know that the characters are going into a situation where they think they've figured something out, and you already know that they have screwed up. And it's evident throughout this entire book, but it's a very roundabout way to ensure that a good number of characters are not aiding others when we have this siege of the main base essentially happen. The others are preoccupied with some other campaign elsewhere, which ultimately doesn't seem to be that important. I didn't feel like that conflict had any weight. Which kind of makes sense given how much prominence Dalinar had in the previous book. Like, this is not Dalinar's book. I was also surprised to see how long it took for us to get any of the flashback chapters. And I was actually really interested. I feel like I read somewhere there are fans who don't care for Rhythm of War quite as much as the others, because the singers are kind of have up to this point been the antagonists, and to kind of have their perspective character be the one that gets the flashbacks is a little odd, because their entire society and their entire way of speaking and viewing the world is completely alien to us, which is rather the point, I think. But I was actually really interested in seeing some of the background of that character. I don't feel like these background chapters revealed as much as I feel they should have. We get a bit of Venli's motivations and her relationship with Ashonai, her sister, as well as her relationship with her mother, which comes into play much later in the book. But I'm struggling to think what we learned from those flashback sequences that we didn't already know. But I guess at the very least, it's not as frustrating as the constant teasing of some big reveal throughout the entirety of the flashback chapters that is just ploddingly sprinkled throughout the book, as we got with Oathbringer. So I liked the background chapters. I liked I liked seeing the perspective of someone else from the other side of the conflict. But even getting through the entire book, I don't feel like we've adequately explored the intricacies and the nuances of the opposing forces. Too much of the fused are presented as beard-twistingly evil servants of Odium, who is himself like passion and rage. And I feel like we strived for nuance, and we strived for character in these in Venli and some of these other characters, only to seemingly have them sidelined by the end of this by the end of this book. We also had Navani working with one of the Fuse, whose name escapes me, in trying to figure out the way that the void light and tower light and all these other lights work. It was again another area where I felt like way too much time was invested in nuances of the magic system that just ultimately don't super interest me, and I think would be better suited for like endnotes or footnotes or something like that, where you get into like the real technical aspects of your magic system rather than telling a good story. I do think the conclusion of Navani and the fused ladies story was very compelling. I feel like that character was very nuanced, despite ultimately being a villainous character. I do think there was some depth to her, and very interesting motivations, I will say, to say the least. So I did appreciate that, but again, it was kind of mired in that section that was a little bit too concerned with the minutia of how the magic system works. I will also say that there's this trend in this book and others where we are viewing it. So we have this fantasy world that we're viewing through a modern day lens, and so scientific progress way too fast in this world. A single person just completely invents completely new ways of moving, completely new ways of using this light that has been part of the world and the culture for forever. Kaladin, meanwhile, is basically inventing therapy by himself, single-handedly. Yeah, it's this weird thing where we have... It reminds me rather of these history stories, these history films, where regardless of who you are or what you're doing, you're American and you are super progressive. So you have things like 300, where they're talking about freeing the slaves when that culture completely had slaves. They were not like some sort of progressive culture. You have a lot of movies set during the Revolutionary War or things like that, or the Civil War in America, where the protagonist is super progressive and, you know, is also a champion of women's rights and things like that. And it's not that those messages are bad, but they are completely anachronistic to what the actual historical person was like. And so we have a similar thing here, where I feel like our scientific progress and our understanding of psychology is now being like hyper accelerated by a single person, and that just doesn't happen. The amount of space that Sanderson has to write and the amount of detail he puts in to so much of his world, it's really odd to me that we're having these single characters just hyper accelerating all manner of scientific, philosophical progress in the world. That's a minor gripe. That's a me thing. Overall, though, I will say I really enjoyed the book. I know that I tend to skew negative in these reviews because I just want to talk about something, and like I can only say so many times like, oh man, wasn't this scene so cool? And like there were a lot of cool scenes. Again, the fourth oath being spoken at the end of the book was amazing. Almost drove me to tears, as did the trial scene. Those were very emotionally moving. The stuff with Shallan's background and her finally coming to accept a part of herself that she had previously kept at arm's length was very emotionally impacting. It's just that all these things are couched in a very massive story where other than these like key moments of growth and moving the story forward, there is a lot of very slow-moving plotting description. There are a lot of scenes of characters just like discussing what they're going to do, and then we have to watch them discuss what they're going to do and discuss their plans, and then we read about them enacting those plans, and then that kind of repeats throughout the book. So it can drag a little bit at points. I will say overall, a lot of fun for me, a great book. If Wind and Truth keeps the momentum that we start seeing in Rhythm of War, that it could be it could bring the series for me back up to 5-star. As is, Rhythm of War is going to get 4 stars. I think the characters are phenomenal. I think that we have reached a turning point with several of them, which is really refreshing to see. And I feel like the world building is exceptional, but there's a downside to each of those points. We shuffle through so many characters. The story moves incredibly slowly. We hyperfixate on details that I'm not personally super invested in. And we are just now coming to a point where it seems like we are rising out of this this low for many of the characters. I also think I would be remiss in rating this book or reviewing this book and not talking about a particular scene that I will try to avoid spoilers for. But I will say that there are certain characters who I had come to really appreciate, and others that I feel a very strong dislike for, and this book did some things for those characters that did not really help with those feelings. But I do think that was an important decision. And I know that it was one that Brandon Sanderson himself has said he had planned for the longest time. So I understand that was in the works for a long time, and the scene really did work despite my personal displeasure for the way that it ended up working out. So that's going to do it for this review. Please let me know down in the comments below what your thoughts are on Rhythm of War, on the Cosmere as a whole. If you've read Mistborn Era 2, basically anything Sanderson that falls under the Cosmere banner. I've been reading it recently. I'm super hyped for it, and I definitely want to talk to more people about it. As always, please like, comment, subscribe, help us grow this corner of our BookTube community. I hope that your reading journey is going well, and until the next one, take care.